right, hello Darren. This is Darren Wise. Welcome to my program. Yes.
It's like rehab, man.
So you've been traveling for a long time, Darren. How did it all kind of start for you?
Well, there was this job opening that was less than desirable, and I got shoved into it by them. And yeah, they kind of just kidnapped me away from my beautiful car and girlfriend and said, "You're doing this now." And I'm like, well, I like people not dying, and I don't want to die, so I guess I'll help you out.
I'm not sure how to respond to that. Great. What have you learned from all of the time that you've spent going between worlds and working for the Profithians and all of that?
There's not like, maybe like there's not like a right way. We have like these goals and standards of things we think are normal, and they're just not. Like, I don't know. Nothing. None of the things we think matter really matter. Other things matter.
I like that.
Not the things we think matter.
What color is your toothbrush?
It's wood, actually. Gosh. It's really cool. It's got like bristles in the wood.
Okay, that is
It's important to brush your teeth. I knew this guy who had this whole song about it. It was very entertaining.
Well, now that things have kind of calmed down for you, what are you up to? How are things now?
Pretty good. I guess I got hit in the head pretty hard at one point, so things are kind of getting better from that a little bit. And yeah, I'm just trying to do things. Got it, making a bit of sourdough, which is fun and good. I've started keeping bees, which is cool. I've been going around a bit too, just kind of still trying to help out however I can. And yeah.
Nice. And I guess one last question for you. What would you like to tell our audience? To know?
Adventure is out there, I guess. I don't know. You think you have these structures that you have to follow, but you don't have to, and then you can just be free and have fun. And that's the stuff that more matters.
I like that. Well, thank you for joining us, Darren. I'm glad they can get to meet you.
Thanks.
Took you long enough.
Yeah, good thing you chose an easy spot. Chapter 25. A snowflake dashed itself against the window, melting almost immediately. I watched it knowing how it felt. To be moving so fast, but in the end, feels like nothing comes of it. The blizzard raged on outside as the council came to order. It had been a quiet 2 weeks, but still long, as we'd been just working away. There always felt like there was so much to do. We'd spent the last weeks clearing out Profithians from across Saramea, but with winter setting in, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to make it up north, or if we'd get cut off. Though as I thought about it, that might actually help. The Profithian settlements up there didn't have supplies coming from Samtath and Tugore anymore, and they might evacuate just of their own accord, which would be all the less that we would have to do. These thoughts mulled around in my mind until Athan started the meeting. I said, before we get into business, I'd like to acknowledge that that Khana is gone. though everyone else is accounted for and well. And I thought, everyone else? What about Darren? He'd been lying comatose for 2 weeks. And the rest of the council members didn't even notice him, or notice that he was gone. So that wasn't as surprising. They didn't show me quite the same respect either. Ever since I'd brought Darren in, even before that, they hadn't always trusted my decisions, and ever since Destiny had taken over again, that was all the more so. Still, I was here in the council meeting, but I didn't speak up against their ignoring Darren, because this wasn't the right time. Othon continued, and he said I need to give the council a report of the attack on Sam Tath that happened a few days ago. And I thought, that's right. Just a little bit before, and he explained this to the council, Sam Tath had been attacked by a creature that the Profithians had sent against them. And Sam Tath, ever since Destiny had cleared out all of the Profithians, the humans that were living there had started to build it back up, and it had become a nice haven. There were still humans in settlements, Ceremaians. They are humans. But there were still humans in settlements all across Ceremea, and a number of them had congregated in Sam Tath, finding it easier to rebuild society altogether. And they'd made a good place for themselves. We'd come and given them supplies, and we'd been helping them out, and they were a part of our empire. But a few days ago, the creature had come. Witnesses had seen Profithians leaving, bringing the creature in and disappearing. The Seer Guard had come in and been able to stop it, but I still remember when I came to see their captive, and it was Slenderman that the Profithians had sent through to attack Sam Tath. That had left all of us on high alert, and I could see the other council members as they heard the news. Worry creased the faces of everyone. This was a new precedent for this war against the Profithians, and it didn't bode well for where things were headed. They'd taken a Teletubby, they'd taken Slenderman, and they could bring him in wherever. So we talked about that there wasn't much we could do. We'd already sent Slenderman back to where he belonged. Though part of me was tempted to just get rid of it in the first place, but anyway, Othon finished filling the council in on that, and then he said, but there are good things happening as well. He said, Kessel, you wanted to tell us about some of your advancements in ISO? And she said, yes, we've been doing a lot of research. We've come up with good things through the months, and we've been implementing it into the military. She said, the newest thing that we've been working on, and we finally had success with, is a kind of light transportation. That the idea is the Seer Guard can use it to get places to be faster with the evacuation. And she explained the hover bikes that they were designing that were powered by ISO, so that our Seers by Siren could power the bikes, which was phenomenal. They just finished the first prototype, and they were starting a few others. She said within the week we should have enough for all of the Seer Guard, and that they would continue to put some out. Absolutely incredible. It was good to see something good that was happening. As she was finishing up, Sestian raised his crystal, and Kessel gave him voice. Every time he spoke, I still worried a little bit. I was glad that he was in charge of our armies, but he kind of had a mind of his own. But he raised his crystal and he said, I don't mean to end this conversation early, but I also have something that I need to tell the council. That the council needs to know. And he said, just a few days ago, an evacuation team came back from northeast Sutirotomere, and the Profithians were gone from the settlement. It was abandoned even before our team got there. And he said, we thought this was odd, but within the last few days, the two teams that have come back from East Fushere and from the Bay of Selapa have seen the same thing, that the cities and the settlements are being abandoned. He said, we aren't sure why, but we may not need to be sending out more evacuation teams. And I was very curious. And he said they might be running out of resources or whatnot. And PN14 raised his crystal and asked, is it possible that the Profithians are pulling their people out of the nearby cities where they're in danger, and or maybe even fortifying the cities further on to make us think that they're abandoning the world, but just trying to close in on space? And Sestian said that's a possibility. We've tried to think about different things, but we don't know. And that's a bad sign. He said, but one thing's becoming more and more certain. We don't need to be sending out these evacuation teams, at least not to close places. And he said, but we can't be sure until even all the way down in Sapuchor. No, that wasn't the one. Oh, he mentioned Familushor. That's right. He said even in Familushor, they need to be put out. And that was true. Though Firendo raised his crystal and he said, well, if we don't need as many people out in evacuation teams, he said we could start working on closing off the world of becoming. Because the whole idea was we isolate the Profithians there, destroy all of the gates that they could possibly use to leave, and trap them on that world, on their world, so they didn't keep taking over others. That was daunting, but the sooner we could get started on that, the better. And Firando mentioned that we could start in the areas that weren't inhabited as much. The entire planet was going to take years, decades longer to destroy all of the gates. But if we could start and just create a circle around where the Profithians were, we could box them in, and we'd continue to work and figure out something, and Kessel would figure out something, or I don't know. But he said, and with the hover bikes, we could get started on that and start cutting off the world. And yeah, we started to think about that. But Kethel raised her crystal again, and she said, I don't mean to turn the conversation away from that. And we do need to be working on becoming, but we've already got some things underway there. She said, but what about the other worlds? Because, there's the world of becoming, and we've already got an idea of that. We do need to start taking away gates. We've been working on Saramea, and we've been clearing that off, and if that's being easier, we don't need to focus on that as much. Earth is taken care of. They've been protected, and looks like they can protect themselves. Trust, we've completely taken the Profithians off of. But what about the world of decision? Have we touched it? Like, there's a whole other world that we need to be worrying about. And Scar raised her crystal, and Kessel gave her voice. And Scar said, we do have scouts on the world of decision. Our travelers have been looking into what's going on there. She said there has been an influx of Profithians there. That, they're doing something. Though there's no more permanent housing, it's all temporary stuff going on. But either way, we're seeing that there is something. And another of the representatives raised their crystal and said, well, are the people from Saramea moving to the world of decision? And Scar shook her head and she said, no, we're seeing an influx of soldiers, mainly. There's training of some kind, and some kind of scientific advancement. We haven't been able to get into the labs, but there's something going on, and we have seen that they're finishing a fleet of 6 new starships. We don't know what the idea is, but that's what they've got going on. And I mean, they're mining more ISO, but I don't think that's new. She said either way, we do need to start thinking about that. And the council, hopefully we're a team, though not always, started discussing plans to send out a mission to the world of decision. As they did, I scratched my arm and looked down, and it was nice to be back to normal. Mostly. Yeah, I'd done a lot more bathing since the world of trust, and I'd definitely gotten some of it out, but not all of it, and it had faded on its own, which left me a little bit worried for what was running through my system. I looked back to normal, though I could feel an inherent gain in strength that was there, and my healing had definitely improved. Since then, it wasn't anything miraculous, but like it was there, and I could feel it. And I could still feel a connection to Crimson, even though even though the plates were gone. That was nice. Though Scar had a connection to him too, so maybe that was just him. I don't know, but I was kind of caught up in that as the council continued and made plans for that. They didn't turn to me for any final decisions anymore, which I was glad for. I didn't want them relying on me too much, but it also kind of hurt. Regardless, eventually the council ended, and everyone took their notes and got ready to head back home. And we stepped out. Well, I stepped out into the blizzard that was raging outside. As I started walking, a voice behind me said, "Gee, can I talk to you for a minute?" I turned as Firendo came up, and I said, "Absolutely, I'm just on my way to the stables." He said, "Are you alright to join me?" And I said, "Yeah, for sure." And he walked out and wrapped his coat closer around him. I said, "You're not used to the cold?" He said, "No. Everyone thinks because I have blue skin, I'm used to the cold. My fishing moon was nice weather all the time, and I mean, there were storms sometimes, but we never fished them." He said, "This is new to me." I said, I get you. California is kind of the same way. I only saw snow twice before I became a traveler. And we came into the stables, and it was still chilly, but as we stepped up to where Blaze was, it was a very nice temperature. And Ferrando gave Blaze a scratch, and he looked down and he said, I just needed to say that I'm sorry about the mission and how everything went, and that we didn't follow your plan." And I said, "Ferrando, I followed the plan that you said because it was smart. And I'm the one that told you to go to that field. You don't need to keep worrying about it." And he said, "Even so, you've always been more connected to destiny, and I should have trusted you. I just let my pride get in the way, and it costed." I said, "Ferrando, none of us could see destiny had nothing to do with that decision. I needed you to teach me humility that day, and I'm just sorry that that lesson costed the lives of others." do not take responsibility for this. I'm the one who gave you those orders. And Ferrando didn't have an answer to that. Eventually he said, I'm just glad that I am following you. And he said, I know sometimes the other council members don't give you the authority that you should have. He said, but I have followed you this far and I will continue to follow you. And it's not because I think that you always make the right choice, or because you are perfectly connected to destiny. He said, from the beginning, I followed you because you would do what needed to be done. Because you would do what's right. He said, I'm not the only one that thinks this way, but we're with you. And we're gonna follow you. He said, thank you for everything that you've done and for everything you're doing. And he slipped out. And it struck me again that he was at least 10 years older than I was. I felt sometimes like we were the same age because he was so energetic, and it felt like he was trying to prove himself at times, but there was a wisdom in him. He left, and it did help, though still my failings hung before my eyes. I finally turned to Blaze and I said, well, you haven't gotten outside today, have you? Want to take a ride? And I moved out toward the door and he didn't move. I said, what's the matter? Are you scared of a little bit of snow? I thought you were a fire horse. Like, is that going to affect you that much? And he stayed still, eyes locked on me. I said, oh, this is about Crimson, isn't it? And he looked down and nibbled at a few oats that were on the floor. I took off my coat and put it on a hook, and I said, Bud, Crimson could never replace you. Yes, I do care for him, which is weird still. He's freaky. I said, but if anything, I got Crimson for Scar. Have you seen how much she loves him? And he kind of shifted back side to side. I came up and I put my arms around his neck, and as always, he knew where to douse the flames as I hugged him close and just buried my face in his neck. And I just held him there for a little bit. I said, you're my steed. No one could ever replace you. I said, come on, let's take a ride. A few seconds later, we were riding out of the stables into the snow, racing through the streets, which were pretty barren. At this point, the blizzard had been going for a few hours, and no one wanted to be out, which meant that the streets were silent as we raced through snow, racing towards us. But barely any of it hit me because it sizzled as it got even close to Blaze. He was a hot horse. But we raced through the streets, and I could have done that for hours. His hooves were silenced by the snow on the cobblestones, and there's nothing quite like the feeling of being in a blizzard, but being completely warm as you race through. But there was another stop I had to make tonight before I was done, and so we went back to the stables. I thanked him and gave him some food, and then made my way back into the Keltis, up the stairs and through one of the hallways. And I heard voices coming through one of the doorways, and one of them was Darren's. And that got me excited. Every night I came, and every night it was the same, but I hoped that something would change. And I came into the doorway to see Darren awake and sitting up. Falair held his hand as Scar offered him a glass of water. He let go of Falair's hand, taking the glass in two hands. He didn't notice me as I walked in. He was entirely focused on the glass as he slowly lifted it to his lips with shaking hands and took a sip. He gave her the glass back, and Scar looked back to see me. I could see the unshed tears in her eyes. Darren handed the glass back to her, but there was no recognition in his eyes of who she was. Darren finally noticed me standing there and looked at me, scrunched his eyes for a minute, and he turned to Flair and he said, "Who is he?" His every word was slow. It was as if he were old, frail and slow and forgetful. But he still looked like my friend. Most of his bandages were gone at this point, and his hair was styled back like it usually was. And Flair said, "That's G, but you called him Reggie. He's the one who found you." And he said, "How long have I known him?" And Scar said, 17 years. And Darren looked back at me and grumbled, and he said, "I feel so small." And Flair said, "That's okay. Take your time, it's okay." She bent down and kissed his forehead. And she had a quiet voice, but I'd come to find a resilience. I had come to find a resilience in her silence. She wore her dark hair down, and she was beautiful in a plain way, but I could see why she and Darren worked well together before all of this had happened. Scar turned and joined me, putting her arm through mine and hugging and holding it tight. I pulled her into a hug and held her there for a while as Falaire smoothed out his blankets, and she said, "You rest. You keep healing. It'll come with time." And Scar and I walked out, and I said, "How long has he been awake?" And she said he came to just after, a little bit after the council meeting. I went up right after, and Falaire and I were just talking about it when he came to. And I said, how much is he remembering? And she shrugged. She said he doesn't remember anything about either of us. And I could tell that hurt her. She said the most that we got was that he almost recognized you. And I said, he will get better. And she said, "I sure hope so, because we need Darren." She said, "Has Destiny told you anything more about being able to heal him?" And I shook my head. That was one area where I had relented and reached out to Destiny to see if there was anything I could do. But I said, I'm thinking of maybe taking a medicine class at a university, but that's going to have to wait until after we close off the Profithians and this war is done. And Scar said, "I still don't understand why you couldn't just sire and do it. When you first sired, you hotwired a UFO and flew us to safety. You can't do anything here." I said, "Destiny was a lot stronger before he imprinted on me. But he's told me that I'm going to need to study myself to be able to do this. He can only give me so much information. And for something this complicated, I would need to already have my own understanding and practice of it for him to do something as complicated as fixing a human mind." She nodded understanding. And I kissed her goodnight and wandered through the halls for a little bit longer, thinking of Darren and everything else that was going on. Eventually I wandered out the back door and into the palace gardens, which were silent. The blizzard had calmed down by now, and there was just a light snowfall. And I walked through the unbroken snow, 6 inches deep, walking through the overpasses, archways, and vines covered in ice passed overhead. The air was cold, but it kept my mind alert as I walked to my own thoughts. End of chapter 25.